Welcome to Being at Home with George. I'm so excited to be here. And let's begin the way we always begin, which is creating the possibility of being able to say yes, to embrace whatever comes up, and at the same time generating a hope so that we can create space between stimulus and response. And in that space, we can choose wisely. And so I feel like right now there's a hurricane. I mean, things are crazy. There's a lot of whirlwinds, and you could talk about it in terms of externally, like the fires in California, or you could talk about having snow in the South, especially in New Orleans, and all the other things, earthquakes, what's in the news. But a lot of things are happening. There's a lot of turmoil, a lot of changes. You can see it sometimes with teams when they change ownership or when they change coaches. Everything changes. So everybody has to adapt, and it creates this chaos. And I feel like there's the hurricane. And the idea is how do we find the eye of the hurricane? How can we find a place of rest, a place of ease, a sanctuary in the midst of the hurricane? Because the hurricane's not going away. But the real question is, are we in the hurricane or are we in the eye? And so when I like to talk about the I like to talk about this idea of a place of rest. Joseph Campbell talked about that in The Power of Myth. He says when the athlete is in championship form, they are not compelled by desire or fear or the hurricane, let's say. They hold their center. They come out of that place. And when you come out of that place of rest, that's when you're performing at your optimum. That's when you're in championship form. And so for us, it's the same thing. How do we access that eye of the hurricane, that place of rest, that silence? Neville Goddard, he'd give speeches, and then after his talk, he would say, let's go into the silence. And so there's a quiet place, there's a stillness there. And I would venture to say that over these past 5 years, we've been talking about different ways of accessing that eye of the hurricane, that place of rest, that silence. And Joseph Campbell talked about that place as a sacred place where you have to have a place where you go and you're not worried about desire or fear, what's in the news or anything. You are holding your center and you're focused on being, just being there in the silence and the stillness. And it's interesting because he referred to it as creative incubation. So what that means is a reference to the idea that I know this from my experience is that when you're coming out of that place of rest, that stillness, that silence, there's a wisdom and a creativity that we have access to. And so we've done a lot of things in the past 5 years. And I want to suggest that some of those things for some of us are going to give us access to that place of rest, that stillness, that silence. And so I know from my upbringing in the Christian tradition, we talk about this idea of be still and know. Now, be still and know God. And what I want to do, I want to take license to say, be still until you know. And so more sitting is required. If you ever work with me from the past and people would ask me, what do I do about this, George? And I would say more sitting or more reflection is required because we don't know yet. So you got to be still until you know. But there's this experience that we can have where we can just listen. And sometimes we have reflections like, what's important now? Make the next play. Or what's my intention? Am I going to bring peace and harmony, or am I going to bring destruction and confusion? And so this idea of knowing that we all have this masterpiece within, I talk about this eye of the hurricane. So how do we access it and act out of that in a way where that creativity, that wisdom, all the stuff that we know we have access to?